Welcome, 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 welcome. So glad to have you all join the Tear Talk Bible Study. So glad to be here with you on today. I'm excited about today's teaching. I've been excited since we started 3 weeks ago, and I hope that you have been enjoying the Bible studies as well. So, if this is your first time, I'm just going to give you a quick recap of what we've been doing. So, the sole purpose of the Tear Talk Bible studies is to help all of us come to a greater place of maturity, healing, and wholeness. And we started off in week 1, and the topic was shed more. Now, when you look at shed in the Bible, there's three types of shedding that you see. There's the shedding of blood, there's the shedding of tears, and there's the shedding of the old man. And we are mainly focused on number 3, which is the shedding of the old man. But we know in doing number 3, number 2 may happen, which is the shedding of tears. But our focus isn't on making you cry, it's on causing us all to consider areas and aspects of our life where we need to reflect Christ more. Because the purpose of maturity is for us to be image and likeness, the image and likeness of God in the earth. So the more we look like him, the more we look like us, the more mature we are. Um, so that was week 1, talking about helping us understand that we need to shed more. And I say more to take into account the fact that many of us have partnered with the Holy Spirit in different areas of our lives, and we have definitely, um, in that process, in that journey, in that relationship, we have been shedding. But there comes a moment in time for us to inspect, for us to look a little deeper, for us to really consider some things and see that there's more. There's always more. More doesn't mean nothing. More doesn't mean bad. More just means becoming more like him in an area. We can be doing really well in one and we could have been avoiding another. So that's the purpose. This isn't to make anyone feel bad. This isn't to say where you are or where you're not. The truth of the matter is, in life, we always have room to grow, and we definitely always have room to mature. So that is the purpose. And then last week we spoke on truth. We spoke on truth, those 5 letter, this 5 letter word, how powerful it is. And one of the verses that we mentioned was Psalms 51:6 about truth being in the inner parts, because we have been using the um, process of a tree losing its leaves to be a picture of us. Like we're a tree, we're full of leaves, but the purpose when leaves are disconnected from a tree, that process is getting rid of the things that are no longer needed, no longer serve the tree at that time. So for us, we're getting rid of the things that are no longer needed, that no longer serve us as we continue to mature. There are some things that we were fully rooted in, that may have been, not that it was horrible, but it just didn't represent God. And there comes a point where the Holy Spirit wants to deal with those things, cause the strength of those things to be weakened, to be released, and then be released so we can reflect Him more and more and more. And in talking about shedding more and then talking about truth, we're really giving a process of really coming to maturity, because there are certain aspects of us having to look inward that are necessary for this to really have the effect and the impact that it should. And what I love about this teaching is, if you've been listening for the last 2 weeks, and now as we go into week 3, this really causes us to have to look at us. This really takes away the excuses that we can use about external sources and really look internally at some things. Because the truth is, a lot of the areas where we may need to shed more in, other people, even those who are closest to us, might not even be aware that that's something that the Holy Spirit wants us to work on during this time or during this season. So I'm thankful because I've always said you can't get free from what you don't acknowledge. You can't get healed from what you ignore. So this is really causing us, and not just not looking at us negatively, but looking at us from the posture of Holy Spirit. What is in me that is not a reflection of you? Help me to be free of that. I partner with you and I'm willing to do the necessary things for this to be released from my life. So, in saying all of that, there's another step and there's another aspect of us that is necessary for us to shed more, and that is necessary for us to not only receive truth, but to fully embrace truth and being able to allow truth, which is the Holy Spirit, to work in us. And that is our will. Yeah, yeah, yeah. By the act of our will. It's required. It's required. It is not, the Holy Spirit doesn't work. Well, let me put it this way. Our partnership is mandatory with Him for healing to come. He doesn't just do stuff on His own. We have to be in partnership with Him. There's a willingness that is necessary on our parts, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the will, because I hear a lot of times, it's like, well, that's just the way I am, or I can't change, and these statements that we can make, a lot of that is basically saying my will doesn't want to do that. My will doesn't want to process that. My will doesn't want to admit that. So let's talk about the will for a little bit. The act of our will. So we're going to be in Romans a lot on today. And again, I hope you understand that I'm not coming from the position of just you doing this in your human strength. I'm really imploring us to engage the Holy Spirit who's dwelling on the inside of our hearts to help us with the things in our hearts, because He knows better than we do, but He is also willing to help us. So let's include our wills in this process. So in Romans 8:11 through 13, listen to this. And I had to start here because it gives us such a beautiful picture of the Holy Spirit and His power within us. Okay, y'all ready? Okay. In Romans 8:11 through 13, it says, "And if the spirit of Him who raised up Jesus from the dead dwells in you," does He dwell? "Then He who raised up Christ from the dead will also restore to life your mortal bodies through His Spirit who dwells in you." So the same Spirit, the same power, think about that. The same Spirit, which is the power that raised Jesus from the dead, as a believer, one who has confessed Christ and received His Spirit, that same Spirit, that same power dwells in you. Think of how powerful that is. Okay, let me keep going. Verse 12. "So then, brethren, we are debtors, but not to the flesh. We are not obligated to our carnal nature to live a life ruled by the standards set up by the dictates of the flesh. For if you live according to the dictates of the flesh, you will surely die. But if through the power of the Holy Spirit, you are habitually putting to death, making extinct, and deadening the evil deeds prompted by the body, you shall really and genuinely live forever. Do you wait? Hold on. I'm gonna need to reread verse 13. And again, for those of you who are listening to me for the first time, my favorite version is the Amplified version, so that's the version that you're hearing. For if you live according to the dictates of the flesh, you shall surely die. But if through the power of the Holy Spirit, you, not him, you are habitually putting to death, making extinct, and deadening, you in partnership with him are deadening the evil deeds prompted by the body. I want you to focus on that word you. It's you and the Holy Spirit. You helping to partner with him and habitually. That's like consistently. It's an effort. This does not happen just cuz. It's like I wonder, it's interesting because we can pray these prayers of power, and it's like, God, I want to be more like you, make me more like you. And the minute the Holy Spirit is like, hey, work on your character. Who was that? What was that? Was it, huh? I don't think we've ever really sat and thought about how the Holy Spirit works through us. And that might just be another teaching, but that is one way. Because when you upset and you want to go off of something and saying, be quiet, you know that ain't you. You know that is not you. That's him at work in you with power. But you have to be willing to habitually put to death, make extinct, and deadening those things. And just like the tree falling, it talks about the abscission zone where it stops the flow of life to that particular leaf. And I see that as the Holy Spirit bringing to our attention that zone in our lives where some things need to be deadened, some things need to be made extinct, but it takes our partnership. It doesn't just happen. Sometimes when I look at different things that are being taught and the way people are living, I don't know if they understand their role. I don't know if they really see the partnership in this thing. I don't know if they really understand the power of their will that causes or assists with the maturity process. It doesn't happen without us. It only happens with our willingness. Yeah, it requires us because it requires both you and him, and he's always ready and willing to do. The question is, are we? Okay. So the other, so y'all know I always have questions. So this kind of comes together with everything that I just said so far. But are we allowing the Holy Spirit to show us truth in the areas that need deadening? Are we allowing the Holy Spirit to reveal to us what needs to be put to death? And then even in that, are we like consistently working when that thing pops up again, when that reveals itself again? Are we doing our part? Are we putting the safeguards in place to make sure that thing dies and then remains dead? So Y'all know I said we was gonna be in Romans, so let's look at a very familiar passage. I have it memorized in the King James Version, but for today we're gonna read it in the Amplified Version. And that's Romans 12:1 and 2, because I think that we sometimes forget our responsibility, you know. I think that, we can do very, very well, and then we think we on easy street. We think there's no more to be dealt with. Like we good. And that don't mean that you're not good with God, but there is a place of maturity there. And when I say maturity, that's not an elite thing, but that's getting to a place of relationship with God. Like Jesus was in the earth as God. He reflected him in every way possible. And like even before Jesus left, it's like make them one. As we are one, Jesus came to bring us back into right relationship with God, to get to that place of just love with God. That requires maturity. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a horrible thing. It's not a task like we should feel like we're burdened by this. It should come from a place of our love for him, to help us partner with the Holy Spirit to we want to reflect him more. So Romans 12:1 through 2. And again, I'm reading the Amplified Version. I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, and beg of you in view of all the mercies of God, to make a decisive dedication of your bodies, presenting all your members and faculties as a living sacrifice, holy, devoted, consecrated, and well pleasing to God, which is your reasonable, rational, intelligent service and spiritual worship. Verse 2 is what I want us to focus on. But verse 1 shows us our role, and it shows us how powerful our will should be in this role. Verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world any longer with its superficial values and customs, but be transformed and progressively changed as you mature spiritually by the renewing of your mind, focusing on godly values and ethical attitudes so that you may prove for yourselves what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect in his plan and purpose for you. Now, there were certain words that I emphasized when I was reading this particular passage. But be transformed by. So these are all connectors. It's all showing us, first of all, it's something you have to do your part, but be transformed, progressively change as you mature spiritually by. Like this happens based on something else. Again, it don't just fall out the sky. By what? The renewing of your mind. Part of the renewing of your mind is partnering with the Holy Spirit and allowing him to show you the areas where you need to shed more. A lot of that can come through the reading of the word. A lot of that can come through prayer. A lot of that can come just by focusing on God, and Holy Spirit brings something to your attention. But it requires your will. Are you willing to go deeper? Are you willing to go further? Are you willing to shed more? Are you willing to mature? Questions. The will. what wishes or has determined shall be done. The will of God. What is the will of God? And I have my thoughts regarding that, but I believe the greatest will of God is maturity. The greatest will of God is for us to come into the greatest level of fellowship with Him that we can. And that takes our will. I'm going to read that same version or that same passage, Romans 12, 1 through 2, or verse 2, I'm going to focus on in the Amplified Classic version. Yes, two versions. It says, do not be conformed to this world, this age, fashioned after and adapted to its external superficial customs, but be transformed, changed by the entire renewal of your mind, by its new ideals and its new attitude, so that you may prove for yourselves what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God, even the thing which is good and acceptable and perfect in His sight for you. I'm going to read that same verse in the Voice version. Do not allow this world to mold you into its own image. Instead, be transformed from the inside out by renewing your mind. As a result, you will be able to discern what God's will and whatever God finds good, pleasing, and complete. See, at the end of the day, it's about image. It's about us being in His image and likeness in the earth. And I can honestly say that there were times that I even in walking with Him for a while, that I didn't always represent His image well. That's why I was pleased when I heard shed more. I'm excited to shed more. I'm excited to reflect Him greater, to me first, because and receive the joy from it, but also to others. So again, this result only happens when we do our part. This result only happens when we surrender our will to the next level. Because I was thinking about, the songs about surrender and the songs about will. And I believe many of us have done that on different levels and different degrees. But what if there's a greater degree of surrender of our will for us to really shed more? Are we willing? Or are we going to just be like, I'm good right where I am? I pray that all of us are willing. I am. But I pray that all of us are willing to shed more. We have a responsibility to mature every single day. When I think of maturity, it's just like someone having a baby and that baby turning 25. There's a whole process between 9 months to 25. And that process looks different from one child to the next. But there are some things that are standard. There are some things that are expected. And if those things aren't there, we know that something is wrong. And I believe for many of us, we've done the standard and we've done the expected. But now there's that next level of participation, that next level of yielding our will to that which the Holy Spirit desires of us. So I believe that this is Romans 7, and I'll put in the notes once I get it fully. But it says, for if your life is just about satisfying the impulses of your sinful nature, then prepare to die. But if you have invited the Spirit to destroy these selfish desires, you will experience life. I think that that's actually Romans 8. verse 13 in the voice version. So the question is, how deep have we invited the Holy Spirit into our will? Not just our heart. Many of us got him in there. But have we partnered with him for this next level of maturity when it comes to our will? So I think I love ending these Bible studies with questions which I just want you to consider. No right or wrong answer, but things to ponder on, things to consider as you go throughout the week. Are there areas where you know a renewing of the mind is needed? How does your will respond when truth is presented? Does it bow or does it rise up? Does this question is good. Does it surrender or does it defend? Does your will surrender when truth is brought up or does it defend? Have you allowed the love of God to go in those areas of defense? Have we considered the state of our will? Have we? So I am excited because there is a mandate for us to mature. And the beauty of maturity is it's something that's ongoing. And I pray that we all are willing to continue. I think if you're watching this Bible study, that means you definitely want to mature. And if you know of others that are in that place of desiring more, you can let them know about the Bible study as well. But for some of you, for these particular questions, you might want to pull out a journal. You might want to write some things down. Don't just keep these types of thoughts in your head. You might want to write them down because it'll be good to go back and look at them as you consider where's your will right now in this season of life. That's a great, great question for believers at all levels. Where's your will in partnership with the Holy Spirit? I pray that you all were blessed by this Bible study, and I will see you next week.